Uh, and so it's really just focusing on the basics. If you focus on the basics, you force the adversary to go to the advanced stuff, and then that's a win, actually.
Welcome. You found CISO Stressed, brought to you by SCYTHE. I'm your host, Liz Wharton. You can find me on Twitter, Lawyer Liz. You can find CISO Stressed on our YouTube channel at SCYTHE, as well as anywhere you listen to podcasts in the audio format. And who better to bring on as one of our guests than Pablo Breuer, who, if you've been within both the military, information security, private sector, you've probably run across Pablo, because I had the pleasure of really getting to know him through some of his work with security BSides and other organizations, really getting the word out. But with Pablo is a former U.S. Navy military director of special operations, advisor to SoftWorks, the NSA and Cyber Command, but currently is sharing his expertise as a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's GeoTech Center. And he is the CISO of Security BSides Las Vegas. And as conferences navigate being virtual and in person, the CISO has no stress over that, do you? So first of all, welcome, Pablo.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you for having me. Yeah, no stress at all. COVID, all the CISOs, we did the same as everybody else. We just, stopped showing up to work and wore pajama pants to all of our Zooms, and we had no additional work with everybody remoting in.
Look, I'm going to point out right now that CISO Stressed is a welcoming environment. So if you happen to be wearing unicorn pajama bottoms, that is A-OK. We encourage all things Team Unicorn. But really, how is that transition? So congratulations also on a fantastic career. This is where I will also get in my Army-Navy football game jokes. Look, West Point took a beating for over a decade. So let them have something to cheer about. But congratulations to you on winding out. But what was one of the first things as you transitioned away from playbooks and all of that kind of more rigorous schedule to the private sector? What was one of the first kind of aha moments of, this is not the Navy anymore?
Oh my goodness, so many of those. Let me steer towards an actual cybersecurity one, if I could. So one of the things that the military is really good at is long-term planning for, hey, where should the organization be in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? What I found in the commercial industry is that you're very lucky if they plan out more than one fiscal year ahead of time. So that's the downside. Now, the upside, what I find in the commercial sector is that they are a lot more agile. They are more quickly able to adjust to things that are happening in the real world and redirect and revector. So there's pros and cons, and there's likely a balance to be struck there, and something to be learned by both the public and the private sector.
Well, and you raise an interesting point, because as we've heard about all these different attacks over the last, I mean, I don't even have to go back to December. Like 2020 was not going to go out quietly, but you hear of all these attacks that have occurred that impact both the public and private sector. So you have CISOs scrambling to defend and respond. But what are some of the challenges that you would have seen if you were still on the government side when you hear SolarWinds? What were some of the things you're like, gosh, I hope they have this in their playbook. I hope they have this, again, from that government perspective?
Yeah, so I've got a really boring answer to that, which is that, SolarWinds was a great example, and everybody got very myopically focused on, oh my goodness, supply chain attacks are here and they're real, and we've been kind of theorizing that they'd be around for a while. Supply chain attacks were actually put out in an IEEE award reception, and the actual example that was given was fudging with GCC, so that no matter what good code you put in there, it would always insert a backdoor into the executable. So these attacks aren't really new, but what's really funny is people forget or they gloss over the basics that really would have prevented it from ever getting to a supply chain attack. So the poor intern that was working there who got thrown under the bus by the CEO. Okay, folks, listen, interns, they're there to learn. They probably need a little mentorship and guidesmanship, and they're there to learn things. So they probably shouldn't be, allowed to go do things that are public facing without a mentor there, right? So good learning moment for the for the
Yeah.
intern, but tragic. So you had so many things. So you had a public facing web server that was in production that was tied to a development network. Well, that's Infosec 101. You had bad versioning control that allowed things on the development side to go to the production side without any review. That's not good. You had bad password management. That's awful. And then you had this poor intern that was allowed to do things public facing without any supervision or help. So all of these things had to line up. And these are all like week one of a SANS introductory to InfoSec or university InfoSec class. And so you really, it's really just focusing on the basics. If you focus on the basics, you force the adversary to go to the advanced stuff, and then that's a win, actually.
No, and it reminds me in the legal world, you can't basically, if something goes sideways, partners from a liability perspective, partners, senior attorneys, really it's frowned upon. And you may try to say, oh, it was a summer intern. It's like, well, you weren't providing the proper supervision. So it still falls on your shoulders. And I like the back to basics and making it's a common theme of making it that much harder of like, don't let an adversary slide in off the easy stuff. Like make them work for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, I always love when I'm interviewing for jobs and they tell me, they ask me the question. They're like, well, you're interviewing for a CISO or some strategic security architect thing. Tell me how you're going to prevent me about 0 days. And my answer is always the same, which is I can't. I can show you the mathematical proof to show you that that's impossible. Number one. Number two, if I force your adversaries to have to use a 0 day, then I'm worth my weight in gold because I've done everything else right.
And admittedly, please tell me that you bring your own whiteboard to interviews so that when you are asked that question, you can then whip out your whiteboard and say, and not only that, I'm prepared to write here you go. But that gets us to the detect side. So, the attacks, they're going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast. And there's too much incentive for it to happen, be it intentional or even sometimes accidental. Uh, Now, what are some of the ways, that you can calculate? Because companies spend lots of money. The government, we won't even get into, and this is going to be my swipe at the Air Force, we won't even get into the F-35s. You're going to spend a lot of money on tools. And not every tool is not going to be perfect every time. So if you're looking at the detection stuff, how do you determine that ROI on your detection tools?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So again, it's really, I think we have to re-scope the argument, and it needs to be how do we make this thing absolutely hack proof, which is never going to happen, and really it's an understanding about what risk are we currently accepting. Is that risk acceptable? If not, how do we get down to a residual risk that is? So one of the problems that we have, and I feel sorry for the poor SOC analysts, right? So just a little bit of, depending on whose math you follow, at the end of 2020, we either had 15 times or 20 times the number of devices on the internet than we had people on the planet. And the networks keep getting faster and faster, and we're logging all of the things from all of the devices all of the time. How is a SOC analyst supposed to go through that?
Exactly. And so what are some of the ways that from CISO down, you can make life easier for them, or that you can tell, like, hey, you're spending a lot of time doing this, you're not going to catch it. Like, how do you prioritize?
That's an excellent question. So, as the CISO, I like to tell people that I'm a risk advisor, and it's not my risk, right? If you're out there in private industry, the risk belongs to the board of directors, the CEO, the COO, because it's company risk. If you're in the military, it belongs to that commanding officer. It's their risk. So I don't get to decide what's acceptable. I just go, hey, boss, here's the risk. Are you okay with that? Um, and then you have to get down to what in the military we call centers of gravity, right? What are the things that, like, if this thing goes away, everything crumbles? Like, everything derives its power from this thing. What is going to make the company shut down or make the military unit not effective in its mission? And those are kind of the jewels to the crown. And those are the things you really want to watch. So absolutely log all the things, because at some point when you have an incident, because you're going to have an incident, having access to those logs so you can do the investigation is very helpful. But is that really do you want your folks that are sitting on the SOC watch for watching all the things, or watching the things that are really important? And I would say, yeah, let's put the bank guards like right outside the main vault, and let's not have them necessarily walking around the parking lot looking for traffic violations.
Well, and you raise a good point, because it's also identifying and knowing where, having that visibility into your network, into your system, and into your processes to understand where the bank vault is located.
It is, and it really comes down to you sitting down with your customers. And if you're the CISO or the Infosec director, the customers are the revenue generating executives in your business, and so you have to sit down with them and say, what do you do? What do you care about? How do you do what you do? And then maybe you sit down with their team leads or with their managers for a week and watch the systems that they access and what they do on those systems. And then you sit down with some front end employees, and you get a really good idea of the information flow, where it comes from, where it goes to, what the normal operations functions are. And you learn very quickly what's important. Unfortunately, what happens is that if you go right to the customer and you say, hey, listen, what's most important to you? They're going to say Salesforce. Well, Salesforce has like 2,500 plugins, right? And not all of them are equally important. So, what is it that you're doing on Salesforce? Which backend databases are you accessing? Which fields are important? You really have to go that next level. Because the customer, the users, all they know is they open up the application or they open up the web browser, and it just works and it's magic. Uh, and that's okay, right? That's why they hire geeks like us to let them think that it's magic, right? If you and I have to explain, IP addresses and signatures and heap sprays, that they're just going to glaze over, and then they're going to wonder why they're paying us, because we're supposed to make things easy.
Well, exactly. And, that delving into going a little bit deeper kind of gets us back to, if we're looking for the attack, understanding that it's going to happen. And the detection requires, fine tuning your tools so that you understand where the pain points are. That the response also requires a little bit of that deeper dive, and having that familiarity and creating that muscle memory almost of, okay, if this, then this. So, of course, I know that in the military, being a military brat, it's all about the exercises, and not always live fire, but at least learning. So, do you have favorite things that you would work on, or uh, that how would you emulate and build that muscle memory within your own teams, or recommendations?
I think you must have looked at my notes before this. I feel like I seeded the question. No, you said two of my favorite things, right? You said drills, and more importantly, you said muscle memory. So, you have to do this in several iterative steps, right? So people kind of dismiss tabletop exercises because nobody's actually quote unquote doing anything, right? You're not filling out logs or you're not filling out sheets. But what's really important about those tabletop exercises is that the managers and the leaders have had discussions. So, not to ruin the ending, but the incidents are never exactly what you talk about in a tabletop. But the fact that you've had those discussions, you already go, oh well, last time we discussed this, Liz on the legal team said X, and Bob in operations said Y, and so I already kind of know what they're thinking. Let me recommend something that they're willing to accept, as opposed to something that we fought about for an hour during the tabletop. And so that helps. And then, as you get down closer to the ground level, the people that are, actually no kidding doing the work, those actions become more specific. And so one of the things that I've done in the past in the military, we've got all of these, standard procedures. Pilots call them knee boards on ships. We've got these different operational sequencing systems, and they're written at about an 8th grade reading level because we're simple creatures. And it's a don't think. When this gauge does this and that gauge does that, start at number 1, read to the period, do that, go to number 2, and then eventually you get to step 8 or 9. It says call somebody that can make a decision and tell them that you've done steps 1 through 8. And what happens is when we run these daily drills, whether they're engineering drills or fire control drills, is you go through and you do these things. And after doing them, every day for 30 or 45 days, you don't even have to look at the list. It just becomes muscle memory and you do it. And what's more, as you get comfortable doing the things that you're doing, you start to learn what the people to your left and to your right are supposed to be doing. And that's really important for a couple of reasons. The first one is that any incident, whether it's physical or infosec, is usually solved by a team of people with different expertise, right? And so knowing what your partners are doing and them knowing what you're doing helps you synchronize better. And it helps you get things like, hey, I know the lawyer is going to call me and ask me this question. I know that, the SOC is going to call me and ask me that question. And so you don't have to go look for the answer. As you get the answer, you just write it down and you wait for the call.
Well, and I think that truly highlights something, and this is a quick shout out to SCYTHE CTO George and his team, because one of the things we try to work on is building that purple team concept of, and at its most basic, it's having those conversations and opening those channels for discussion between the executive suite, the red team, blue team, purple team, green team, whatever colors you have, but bringing everyone together so that you know who to call and you know what information they're probably going to need, because you've practiced, you've simulated that adversary, okay, if this is flipped, we need to, this alert's going off, what information are they going to need? And of course, now I'm completely picturing you running these exercises and going, and legal is going to call in a panic in 5, 4, 3, 2, there she is. But you build that trust because you've had those conversations.
You have, and again, the people to the left and to the right of you, right, once they see you going through your actions, they become very comfortable that you know what to do. And I think down at the ground level, again, I think that in InfoSec, we're really good about doing that for, say, spear phishing, right? We send the phishing simulator and they report it and we go, great, great. How often do you see in a corporation that they go by and they hand a frontline operator a little note that says, you've just gotten this file, and this file was on the internet and it was stolen proprietary data. What do you do? Right? Because that's a nightmare scenario we all deal with, regardless of industry. And why aren't we practicing these things? Right? Your frontline operators that are likely going to be the ones to catch it because your users are your best sensors. Enable them, right? Enable them to help you out and help with the process.
No, I love it. And what it really sounds like is we need to bring you into the next Scythe Unicon because you are doing a much better job of breaking down some of these concepts that even our customers come back and talk about. So now that you've created these nightmare scenarios, one of the things we try to do with CISO Stressed is, and this is also because I have a sweet tooth, that stressed backwards is desserts. And so after you've had a challenging day, managing, putting out the fires, getting everything back, what is something that you do to kind of wind down, be it a favorite food, a favorite activity? Uh, How do you deal with the stress of being a CISO?
I ride motorcycles.
Fantastic.
I've got a couple of hobbies, but that is one of them. But what I've realized is that most of my hobbies are hobbies that require immense concentration. So when you're riding a motorcycle, you have to concentrate on the road, on the bike, on the traffic conditions, which means that I'm not thinking about anything else but the motorcycle and keeping myself safe. And that means I'm not thinking about CVEs and solar winds and
Mhm.
awful Zoom meeting where the boss asked me a question I gave the wrong answer to. I'm not thinking about any of that. And so I go on an hour or 2 hour motorcycle ride and I come back and I feel much better because I haven't been thinking about whatever was stressing me out.
Well, thank you. And that is great. I'd say happy trails, blue skies, and tailwinds. But one last way, where can our listeners find out more about the work that you're doing, both with BSides, Atlantic Council? Uh, Shamelessly plug away and tell us where they can find additional insights from you.
Yeah, thanks. So I am lucky enough to get to work with the Atlantic Council, and specifically, I work with the GeoTech Center. And so you can find that at atlanticcouncil.org/programs/geotech center, or you can just Google my name and GeoTech Center. They have a fantastic, at least monthly, sometimes weekly GeoTech hour, and it's run by Dr. David Bray, who he's one of these people that's so smart that he walks in and all the lights dim. And it's really just a fantastic group of very diverse experts in various fields. And so we have a lot of fun in there.
No, well, thank you. And so, for those of you listening, I've been chatting with Dr. Pablo Breuer. Find him online and catch us for the next CISO Stress. We'll have links to all of the stuff we've been talking about in our show notes, and look forward to the next one. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Liz.